By the time Iris Mitchell walked into the glass conference room on the 32nd floor, the people inside had already decided what she was worth. They saw the Navy cleaning uniform. They saw the rubber gloves folded in one hand. They saw the gray streak near her temple, the quiet way she kept her shoulders lowered, the access badge that did not open executive doors, and the name tag that simply said Iris. What they did not see was the notebook in her locker, filled with years of market patterns, risk formulas, old bond structures, and handwritten corrections. They did not see the woman who used to read annual reports the way other people read novels. They did not see the thousands of nights she had spent alone in empty offices, wiping coffee rings from tables where men in tailored suits had made mistakes worth more than her entire neighborhood. And they certainly did not see the one thing that would ruin the most important deal Sterling and Hale had tried to close in a decade. 12 minutes later, a room full of partners, trustees, attorneys, and investment officers would stop laughing. 12 minutes later, the man who had called her invisible would be begging everyone not to listen to her. And 12 minutes later, Iris Mitchell would prove something that every powerful room forgets sooner or later. Knowledge does not always arrive wearing a title. Sometimes it comes in after midnight, carrying a mop bucket. Sterling and Hale Financial occupied the top floors of a steel and glass tower in downtown Chicago, the kind of building where the lobby smelled faintly of marble dust, expensive leather, and flowers replaced before they had time to wilt. In the morning, people came through the revolving doors holding coffees with names written on the side, speaking into wireless earbuds, checking watches that cost more than rent. At night, after the elevators emptied and the skyline turned blue behind the windows, a different group entered through the service entrance. They came with carts, keys, plastic bags, and tired feet. They were the people who made the office look untouched by human life before the important people returned. Iris Mitchell was one of them. She worked the evening shift 6 nights a week from 7 in the evening until nearly 3 in the morning. Her section included the executive floor, the client presentation rooms, and the east hallway where the senior partners kept their offices. She knew which partner left half a sandwich in the credenza every Thursday. She knew which analyst cried quietly in the wellness room during quarter-end close. She knew which conference room smelled like burnt coffee, no matter how many times the carpet was cleaned. More than anything, she knew paper. Sterling and Hale was a financial advisory firm. But to Iris at night, it became a landscape of discarded paper, draft presentations, balance sheet summaries, portfolio reviews, risk disclosures, legal markups, sensitivity tables printed in color and thrown away when someone changed a logo. Most people would have seen trash. Iris saw fingerprints, not the kind left by hands, the kind left by decisions. She had learned years earlier that people reveal themselves in what they throw away. An anxious analyst prints the same page 4 times. A careless director leaves red-lined assumptions beside the shred bin instead of inside it. A nervous team marks a footnote for revision, then removes the footnote entirely. And a person trying to hide risk does not always look guilty. Sometimes he looks polished, confident, and very busy. For almost 3 years, Iris had cleaned Sterling and Hale without anyone there knowing who she had once been. That was partly because no one asked, and partly because Iris had stopped offering parts of herself to rooms that had already decided not to receive them. She was 52 years old, though people often guessed older because exhaustion changes the face faster than time. She had grown up on the south side in a small apartment above a laundromat where the radiators hissed too loudly in winter and the windows stuck in summer. Her mother cleaned offices. Her father drove a city bus and kept a cigar box full of old receipts, pay stubs, and savings bonds. On Friday nights, when the bills were spread across the kitchen table, he let Iris add the columns. He used to tell her that numbers were not cold if you knew whose life was inside them. Rent was a number, groceries were a number, bus fare was a number. Medicine, overtime, interest, late fees, school lunches, winter coats. Every number had a body behind it. Every decimal point was attached to someone waiting, working, worrying, or hoping. Iris never forgot that. She was the kind of child who balanced the household checkbook before she was old enough to drive. She won math competitions in classrooms where the textbooks were older than she was. She earned scholarships, lost one after her mother got sick, earned another, took night classes, worked in payroll, then accounting, then eventually landed a junior risk analyst position at a regional investment firm called Winslow Pierce. For a while, she believed work would reward accuracy. That belief did not survive long. At Winslow Pierce, Iris learned how financial rooms really behaved. The first time she spotted a serious mismatch in a mortgage-backed product, a senior manager told her she was being too literal. The second time, he told her to stop slowing down the team. The third time, he removed her from the project and kept her spreadsheet. Months later, when the losses arrived, the same men who had ignored the warning described the disaster as impossible to predict. Iris knew better. But knowing better did not always save a person. Her husband, Aaron, was diagnosed with kidney disease the same year the markets shook loose. Their savings disappeared into hospital parking copays, specialist visits, and the quiet expenses nobody puts in inspirational stories because they are too ordinary to sound dramatic. Gas, compression socks, meal replacement shakes, a chair that could recline enough for him to sleep. After Aaron died, Iris tried to return to finance, but by then she was a middle-aged black woman with a resume gap, a reputation for raising concerns, and no patience for smiling while men half her age explained basic risk to her. So she took the work she could get. At first, she told herself cleaning was temporary. A month, then a season, then until her daughter Maya finished college, then until the debt collectors stopped calling. Life has a way of stretching temporary things until they become the shape of your days. Still, Iris never stopped studying. In the locker room at Sterling Hale, behind a dented metal door with a lock that stuck, she kept a small black notebook. The cover was soft at the corners from being carried in bags and coat pockets. Inside were copied formulas, articles from public finance journals, notes from free webinars, lists of terms and questions she wanted to answer when she got home. Some nights, after her shift, she would sit at her kitchen table while the city was still dark and read until the letters blurred. It was not ambition exactly. Ambition sounds clean. It sounds like a ladder. For Iris, learning had become a way of staying alive inside herself. Sterling Hale was exactly the kind of place that believed knowledge belonged to people with offices. The firm had built its reputation advising pension funds, universities, hospitals, and wealthy families. Its website used words like stewardship, clarity, and trust. In the lobby, a bronze plaque carried a sentence from the firm's late co-founder, Elijah Hale, who had believed that finance was supposed to protect the future, not gamble with it. Most employees passed the plaque without reading it. Graham Reddick certainly did. Graham was a managing director at Sterling Hale, 41 years old, handsome in a sharp, impatient way, with silver cufflinks and a voice that made every sentence sound like a closing argument. He had come from an Ivy League business school, moved fast through the firm, and treated kindness as a form of inefficiency. People called him brilliant because he spoke quickly and made other people afraid to disagree. He liked rooms arranged around him. He liked juniors who nodded before he finished a sentence. He liked cleaners, receptionists, assistants, and security guards to become part of the background when he entered. Graham was leading the biggest proposal of his career, a structured income product called the Harbor Yield Reserve, designed for the Northbridge Public Employees Retirement Fund. Northbridge managed pensions for teachers, librarians, sanitation workers, bus drivers, courthouse clerks, and nurses across 3 counties. The fund had been struggling to meet return targets without taking reckless risk, and Sterling and Hale promised a solution that sounded almost too good to question. Steady yield, conservative exposure, diversified collateral, downside protection. Those were the words in the deck. Iris saw the deck for the first time on a Tuesday night in March, or at least she saw the discarded pieces of it. Conference room 32C had been used all day by Graham's team. When Iris entered, the room was still warm from too many bodies, too much coffee, and too little air. The trash bin under the credenza overflowed with paper cups and marked-up printouts. Someone had left sesame seeds scattered across the table. One chair was tipped at an angle, as if someone had left in a hurry. Iris did what she always did. She collected cups, wiped the table, straightened chairs, replaced the liner in the bin. Then one page slid loose from a stack near the recycling box and landed face up by her shoe. She would later remember how ordinary the moment felt. No music, no lightning, no sudden chill, just a page on the carpet. It was a sensitivity table, the kind used to show how a product might behave under different conditions. Most of the rows were harmless to anyone who did not know what to look for, but Iris knew. Her eyes caught on a column labeled correlation stress, then on a footnote that referred to a collateral pool called Bridge 3. The numbers beside it were too smooth, too obedient. Markets did not behave that politely when liquidity tightened. She bent down and picked up the page. At first, she thought maybe she was tired. It was after midnight. Her knees hurt. She had cleaned 27 offices already. But the longer she looked, the more her stomach tightened. A formula had treated several pools as though they were meaningfully separate when in a downturn they would likely move together. The model assumed the roof would only leak in one room at a time. Iris knew from experience that when a storm is strong enough, the whole ceiling starts to drip. That was bad. But the footnote was worse. Bridge 3 was not just a pool of ordinary income assets. It appeared to contain exposure tied to distressed municipal leases and privately refinanced obligations from several school districts. On paper, they looked like separate streams. In real life, they depended on the same tax receipts, the same state reimbursement schedule, and the same fragile refinancing market. If one pressure point failed, the others would not politely wait their turn. Iris stood there with the page in one hand and a damp cloth in the other, feeling the years fold over each other. She had seen this trick before. Not the same product, not the same names, but the same shape. Risk cut into pieces and renamed until everyone could pretend the pieces were unrelated. The next evening, Iris tried to tell someone. She chose carefully. She did not go to Graham. A woman like Iris learned early that truth needed a doorway, and not every doorway opened from her side. Instead, she waited until Lena Ortiz, a junior analyst on Graham's team, came back to the floor around 9:30 with red eyes and a vending machine dinner. Lena was one of the few people who treated the cleaning staff like people with names. She moved her laptop when Iris needed to wipe beneath it. She said thank you without making it sound like charity. Once, when a senior associate had snapped his fingers at Iris beside the coffee bar, Lena had quietly brought over a fresh pack of trash bags before Iris could ask. It was not heroism, it was decency. And in certain rooms, decency was noticeable. That night, Iris asked Lena whether the Harbor Yield Reserve had been stress-tested against correlated municipal cash flow disruptions. Lena stared at her for a moment, not because she thought the question was foolish, but because no one wearing Iris's uniform was supposed to ask it. Then her face changed. She lowered her voice and asked where Iris had heard that term. Iris did not answer directly. She only said that one of the printed pages in 32C had a Bridge 3 footnote that did not match the diversification claim. She suggested Lena check whether the model was pulling the right stress case into the final presentation. She kept her tone practical, almost casual, as if she were pointing out a spill before someone slipped. Lena listened. That mattered. But listening was not the same as having power. The next afternoon, Lena ran a quiet check, and found something that bothered her. Not enough to prove misconduct, enough to ask questions. She brought it to her immediate supervisor, a vice president named Martin Keene, who had survived 12 years in finance by never placing himself between an ambitious man and a profitable deal. Martin skimmed the notes, frowned, and told Lena that Graham's model had already been reviewed by senior leadership. When Lena said she wanted to verify one of the assumptions, Martin asked who had put the concern in her head. She made the mistake of saying Iris's name. By 7:30 that evening, Graham Reddick knew. Iris was cleaning the small client lounge near the east windows when Graham walked in with Martin behind him. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Some people learn how to humiliate others softly because softness gives cruelty the costume of professionalism. Graham asked whether she had been reading confidential materials. Iris said she had picked up a page left on the floor. He told her that pages on the floor still belonged to Sterling and Hale, not to the cleaning contractor. He said the firm's clients trusted them with sensitive information. He said unauthorized handling of documents was a serious matter. He spoke as if he were explaining ethics to someone who had never had any. Iris kept her hands folded in front of her. That seemed to irritate him more than fear would have. Then Graham looked at the damp cloth hanging from her cart and told her that her job was to remove fingerprints, not leave them on things she did not understand. Martin looked away. That was the part Iris remembered, not the insult. She had heard worse. She remembered Martin looking away because it told her the room knew exactly what was happening and had decided to let it happen. The next day, the cleaning contractor received a warning. Iris was not named directly, but everyone understood. There had been a breach of professional boundaries. Staff were reminded not to review move copy photograph or comment on client materials. Any violation could result in removal from the account. The supervisor, Mrs. Alvarez, called Iris into the supply room and rubbed her forehead before speaking. Mrs. Alvarez was not cruel. She was tired. She managed 23 cleaners across 4 buildings and spent most of her life between complaints from people above her and emergencies from people below her. She told Iris that she could not afford trouble with Sterling and Hale. None of them could. The contract fed families. One wrong incident and corporate would replace the whole crew with another vendor by Monday. Iris apologized. But apology did not mean she had been wrong. For the next week, she did what she was paid to do. She emptied trash, cleaned glass, polished the elevator buttons, sanitized desks, and pretended not to notice when conversations stopped as she entered a room. Graham's team began placing red folders in locked bins whenever she came near. A few associates smirked when she passed. Someone taped a note above a recycling box that said, "Confidential means confidential," as if a building full of financial professionals had suddenly discovered the concept because a cleaner had understood a spreadsheet. Iris did not respond. At home, she opened her notebook. Maya, her daughter, was 24 in her final year of a nursing program and old enough to recognize when her mother was carrying something heavier than fatigue. Maya had inherited Erin's gentle eyes and Iris's habit of going quiet when thinking. She watched her mother copy figures from memory onto the back of an electric bill, then erase them, then write them again. Maya asked if Sterling and Hale was in trouble. Iris said she did not know yet. Maya asked if telling the truth would put her job at risk. Iris looked at the unpaid balance on the kitchen counter, then at the calculator beside it, then back at the page. It already had. The practical thing would have been to stop. That is what most people do, and often for reasons that deserve compassion. People stop because rent is due, because medicine is expensive, because children need tuition, because nobody claps for courage when the lights are about to be shut off. It is easy to admire truth-telling from a distance. It is different when truth has your paycheck in its hand. Iris knew all of that. She also knew who Northbridge represented. Her father had retired on a city pension. Her mother had survived her last years because of a modest benefit that arrived on the first of every month. Public employees did not have golden parachutes. They had carefully counted futures. A bad investment did not become a headline to them. It became delayed retirement, higher contributions, closed clinics, cut library hours, and old people going back to part-time work with swollen knees. Numbers had bodies behind them. That was the sentence she could not escape. So she kept watching. And because everyone believed she was invisible, she saw more than they meant her to see. A week before the Northbridge meeting, Sterling and Hale began renovating an old records room near the freight elevators. The space had once belonged to compliance, but had slowly become a graveyard for boxed files, broken chairs, and holiday decorations nobody wanted. Iris was assigned to help clear dust and prepare the room for contractors. Most of the boxes were labeled with dates from years earlier. She did not open sealed files. She did not need to. One box had split along the bottom from age and dampness. A stack of binders had slid halfway out, and the top binder bore a faded label, Municipal Income Product Review 2011. Iris saw the name Elijah Hale on the first page. That made her pause. Elijah Hale had died before she started at the firm, but his name was everywhere in the building. He had been the moral face of Sterling and Hale, the co-founder, who gave speeches about duty and client trust. His portrait hung near the boardroom, silver-haired, stern, almost disappointed. The binder should have gone straight to compliance. Instead, it had been sitting for years beside a box of old phone chargers. Iris did not take it. She sat on an overturned crate, pulled on her reading glasses, and read where it lay open. The memo was 12 pages long. She only needed 4 to understand its importance. Elijah Hale had reviewed a proposed product that resembled the Harbor Yield Reserve in structure, though not in name. He had warned that municipal-linked income streams could appear diversified while sharing the same underlying fiscal stress. He had written in plain language that clients should never be sold stability created by assumptions rather than by actual resilience. One line in particular stayed with Iris. He had written that a model can hide a weak bridge, but it cannot hold the weight when people begin to cross. Iris sat very still. There it was. Not proof of fraud by itself, not enough to stop a deal, but evidence that Sterling and Hale had known this pattern before. Evidence that the firm's own founder had warned against exactly the kind of logic Graham was now using. Iris wrote the memo titled Date and Box Number in her notebook. She noted the page references. Then she closed the binder and placed it carefully on top of the damaged box, where anyone with honest eyes could find it. The next morning, she mailed a handwritten letter to Nadine Cho Sterling and Hale's chief compliance officer. Iris did not trust the company email system, and she did not have access anyway. She wrote plainly. She explained that she worked on the cleaning staff. She gave the dates, room numbers, document labels, and concerns. She named the Harbor Yield Reserve Bridge 3, the correlation stress table, and the 2011 memo. She did not accuse anyone of a crime. She asked only that compliance review the model before Northbridge signed. Then she waited. Nothing happened. At least, nothing visible. Graham's team moved faster. The Northbridge meeting was pushed up by 2 days. The final deck went into production. The executive assistants ordered breakfast for 24. The IT department tested the screen in the main boardroom. Someone from marketing placed fresh flowers beneath Elijah Hale's portrait. Then Iris's access badge stopped working on the executive floor. Mrs. Alvarez received another complaint. This one claimed that Iris had been lingering near restricted areas and distracting analyst staff with inappropriate questions. There was talk of removing her from Sterling and Hale entirely. The contractor could reassign her to a hospital across town, but it would mean fewer hours, less pay, and a commute that made sleep almost impossible. When Mrs. Alvarez told her, she looked genuinely sorry. Iris nodded. She had expected retaliation. That did not make it hurt less. That night, she cleaned the 29th floor instead of the executive level. The carpets were older there. The windows had fewer fingerprints. No one had left imported sparkling water on the table. The people on that floor did operations, payroll, vendor management, and internal reports. They spoke less loudly than the deal teams. Their trash held fewer glossy decks and more real work. Around midnight, Lena found Iris near the copy room. Lena looked frightened. She had run the stress case again, quietly, using an older version of the model she had saved before Graham's edits. Iris had been right. The product's downside risk was not impossible. It was hidden by a set of assumptions that treated related cash flows as independent. When Lena adjusted them, the protective layer thinned dramatically. In a severe but plausible stress scenario, Northbridge could lose hundreds of millions not because markets had performed beyond imagination, but because the model had been built to imagine too little. Lena had brought the concern to Martin again. This time, Martin told her to delete the test file. That changed everything. A mistake can be corrected. A warning deliberately buried becomes something else. Lena did not know what to do. She was 26, first in her family to work in finance, still paying student loans, still learning which rules were real and which were decorations. She had watched Graham make careers and break them with a sentence. She wanted to be brave, but bravery felt expensive. Iris understood that better than anyone. She did not tell Lena to throw herself into the fire. She asked what records existed. She asked whether the model versions were stored in the document system. She asked whether the final deck still cited the old risk paper that Graham liked to mention when clients needed reassurance. Lena said yes, the appendix referenced an article called "Correlation is not diversification." Iris closed her eyes. For 1 second, the whole building seemed to breathe around her. That article had been written 15 years earlier for a small public finance newsletter after the market crash. It had not made anyone rich. It had not put Iris on television. Most people who used it in presentations probably never wondered about the author. The byline had been simple: I am Mitchell. Iris May Mitchell. She had written it at her kitchen table while Aaron slept in the next room, using a borrowed laptop that overheated if she opened too many browser tabs. She had written it because she was tired of watching institutions pretend that slicing risk into new shapes made ordinary people safer. She had written it because she still believed, foolishly perhaps, that if enough people understood the pattern, fewer families would be harmed by it. And now Graham Reddick was using her work to sell a product that violated its entire warning. Iris did not laugh. She almost did. Not because it was funny, but because life sometimes arranges insult with such precision that the only other option is to break. The night before the Northbridge meeting, Iris was allowed back on the executive floor under supervision because 3 cleaners had called out sick and the client rooms had to be perfect. Mrs. Alvarez warned her to keep her head down. Iris promised she would do her job. She did. She also watched. In conference room 32A, Graham and his team rehearsed until nearly 11. Through the glass wall, Iris saw him stand at the head of the table, clicking through slides, cutting people off, smiling at imaginary trustees. The final slide carried the Sterling Hale crest and the words, "Built for security in uncertain markets." Lena sat near the end of the table, pale and silent. When the team finally left, Iris entered with her cart. A marker had rolled under the table. Someone had spilled espresso near the screen. On the glass wall, a junior associate had written fragments of talking points and erased them badly, leaving ghost words in black smudges. Iris wiped the glass slowly. Then she saw the problem in a place no one had meant to leave it. On the tray beneath the presentation screen lay a printed copy of the final appendix. The risk paper citation was there. The product summary was there. And beside it, in a table labeled Downside Protection Analysis 1, cell referred to the wrong stress scenario. Not just a questionable assumption, a wrong reference. A technical error so small that a busy room could miss it, and so large that it changed the story the model told. Iris did not take the page. She took out her notebook and copied the row label, the footnote number, and the scenario ID. Then she wrote the corrected relationship on the glass wall with a dry erase marker. Not the whole model, just enough. Bridge 3 plus school district lease exposure plus delayed state reimbursement equals shared stress, not independent protection. She was still writing when Graham came back for his phone. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Graham looked at the glass, then at Iris, and something colder than anger crossed his face. Anger would have meant he was surprised. This was recognition. He understood that she had found something real. That made him more dangerous. He did not shout. He walked to the wall, took the eraser, and wiped away her writing with slow, deliberate strokes. Then he told her that whatever fantasy she had built in her head ended tonight. He said the Northbridge meeting would happen in the morning. He said if she came near the boardroom, the police could decide whether she was a cleaner or a thief. Iris looked at the glass where the numbers had been. A faint trace remained. Graham saw her looking and smiled. He told her that people like her always mistook proximity for qualification. It was a clean sentence. Practiced. Cruel enough to cut, polished enough to deny. Iris said nothing, but when Graham left, Lena was standing in the hallway. She had heard enough. The morning of the Northbridge presentation arrived bright and cold. Sunlight struck the tower windows so sharply that the whole building seemed made of white fire. In the lobby, security guards checked visitor names against printed lists. Upstairs assistants arranged folders at each seat in the main boardroom. The coffee was fresh. The screen worked. The flowers beneath Elijah Hale's portrait had been replaced again. Northbridge sent 9 representatives. There were pension trustees, an outside counsel, an independent investment consultant, and a retired school principal named Evelyn Price, who chaired the board. Evelyn had spent 38 years in public education, and she had the calm, assessing face of a woman who had watched thousands of children try to hide things badly. Graham greeted the Northbridge group with charm. He was good at charm when the audience mattered. He spoke about trust stewardship and the responsibility of protecting those who had spent their lives serving the public. He mentioned teachers. He mentioned bus drivers. He mentioned nurses. He mentioned them with the smooth distance of someone who admired ordinary labor most when it stayed safely inside a presentation. Iris was not supposed to be there, but 20 minutes before the meeting, a catering urn leaked coffee across the credenza in the boardroom. The spill spread under the cups toward the client folders and down the cabinet face. Someone called facilities. Mrs. Alvarez was on another floor. The nearest cleaner was Iris. That is how she entered the room. Not as an invited expert, not as a witness, as the person called when something needed to be wiped up quickly and quietly before it embarrassed the firm. Graham's eyes found her the moment she stepped inside. For a second, his smile flickered. Then he recovered. He made a light comment about the dangers of overfilled coffee urns. A few people chuckled. Iris knelt by the credenza and began cleaning the spill. She could feel the room above her. The polished shoes, the shifting chairs, the low voices, the screen glowing with the title slide. She kept her face calm and her movements steady. She had cleaned around important meetings before. The trick was to become furniture with hands. But Evelyn Price watched her, not closely at first, just enough to notice that Graham's tone changed whenever Iris moved. Just enough to notice that one of the junior analysts, Lena, could barely look at the screen. Graham began the presentation. He was excellent. That was part of the danger. He knew where to slow down, where to make eye contact, where to let a chart sit long enough to look reassuring, but not long enough to invite deep inspection. He described Harbor Yield Reserve as a disciplined solution for a difficult market. He emphasized layered protection. He repeated the word diversified so often that it began to sound like a prayer. The trustees listened. The consultant took notes. The lawyers followed the footnotes. Sterling and Hale partners sat along the wall, proud and still. Iris finished cleaning the coffee, but no one told her to leave. She moved quietly toward the side door with her cart. Then Graham advanced to the appendix slide. It contained the citation. I. M. Mitchell. Correlation is not diversification. He used it as a shield. He told Northbridge that Sterling and Hale's approach was informed by respected post-crisis research on correlation risk. He said the firm understood the lessons of the past and had built safeguards accordingly. Iris stopped walking. It was not dramatic. She did not turn suddenly. She simply stopped, one hand on the cart handle, her eyes on the screen. Evelyn Price noticed. So did Lena. Graham noticed last, and irritation passed over his face. He continued speaking, but now his rhythm was slightly off. Evelyn raised a hand. She asked whether the woman by the door needed something. Graham smiled in a way that asked the room to join him in pretending the interruption was beneath them. He said she was part of the cleaning staff and would be leaving. Evelyn did not look at him. She looked at Iris. She asked if Iris had seen something on the slide. The room changed, not loudly. Powerful rooms rarely change loudly at first. The air simply tightened. Several partners shifted in their chairs. Martin Keene looked down at his folder. Lena's pen stopped moving. Graham answered before Iris could. He said there was no issue, only a staff member who had previously misunderstood confidential materials. He apologized to Northbridge for the distraction and reached for the remote. Evelyn's voice stayed calm. She said she had asked Iris. That was the first crack. Iris stood beside her cart. Her uniform was clean but worn at the cuffs. Her shoes were practical black and scuffed at the toes. She had slept 3 hours. Her heart was hitting hard enough that she could feel it in her wrists. She knew what speaking might cost. She also knew what silence might cost someone else. So she began simply. She said the slide was using I. M. Mitchell's paper to support a structure the paper would have warned against. She said the model appeared to treat related income streams as independent under stress. She said Bridge 3 was not protected from the same pressure points affecting the other pools. She said if state reimbursement delays, school district lease stress, and refinancing market tightening happened together, the product would not behave the way the presentation suggested. No one moved. Graham gave a short laugh, the kind meant to instruct others how to respond. He told the room that Sterling and Hale appreciated enthusiasm, but complex institutional products could not be evaluated from stray pages collected after hours. Iris kept her eyes on Evelyn. She said she was not evaluating it from stray pages. She named the exact appendix table, the scenario ID, the footnote, the outdated assumption, the reference error in the downside protection analysis. She said the model was pulling a mild stress case into a line describing severe correlation pressure. She said that if the proper case was used, the protective layer became far thinner. The independent consultant leaned forward. That was the second crack. Graham's face hardened. He asked security standing near the door to escort Iris out. He said the firm could not allow unauthorized personnel to disrupt a confidential client meeting. His voice was still controlled, but it had lost its shine. Before security moved, Evelyn asked a question that would later be repeated in every internal report about that day. She asked why a cleaner knew the model better than the man presenting it. No one laughed then. Iris did not enjoy the silence. It was too heavy for enjoyment. She had not come to embarrass anyone for sport. She had come because a pension fund was being asked to trust a bridge that had not been built to hold. Graham said Iris had no credentials relevant to the discussion. That was when Lena stood. Her chair made a small sound against the floor, but in that room it landed like a door opening. She said Iris had raised the correlation issue days earlier. She said she had run an alternate stress case and found material differences. She said she had been instructed not to pursue it. Martin whispered her name in warning. Lena did not sit down. Graham turned on her with the look of a man watching a subordinate become a witness. He said junior staff sometimes misunderstood draft analysis. He said final models had been reviewed. He said Sterling and Hale had no obligation to entertain theories from cleaning personnel and anxious first-year analysts. Then Iris spoke again. She said the article in his appendix was not a theory from cleaning personnel. It was hers. At first, the sentence did not enter the room properly. People heard it, but they did not know where to put it. A partner frowned. The consultant looked from Iris to the slide. Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly, not in disbelief, but in concentration. Iris said her full name was Iris May Mitchell. I.M. Mitchell. She had written, "Correlation is not diversification," after the last crisis, when public institutions were still trying to understand how apparently separate risks had moved together. The paper had been cited in training materials, pension workshops, and risk seminars for years, usually without anyone caring about the person behind the initials. The room became so quiet that the hum of the lights was audible. Graham's mouth opened, then closed. It was a small thing, but people noticed. They noticed because Graham Reddick was never without words when he believed he controlled the room. The independent consultant pulled the paper up on his laptop. The byline was exactly as Iris said, Iris M. Mitchell. The author bio was old, brief, and almost painfully modest. Former risk analyst and public finance researcher. Former. That word carried its own story. Evelyn asked Iris if she could explain the concern in plain terms for the board. Iris could have buried Graham in terminology. She could have used every word he had assumed she did not know. She could have made the room pay for its contempt by making the explanation too technical for anyone to interrupt. She did not. She spoke the way her father had taught her at the kitchen table. She said, "Imagine Northbridge owned 5 buildings across a city, and every report claimed the roofs were separate, so a leak in one would not matter much. But suppose all 5 roofs had been repaired by the same contractor with the same cheap material, and all depended on the same delayed payment to finish the work. Then a hard storm would not create 5 separate problems. It would create one shared problem with 5 addresses." That, she said, was what the Harbor Yield Reserve presentation was hiding. Not necessarily with one obvious lie, with assumptions that made connected risks appear separate. She explained that public employees would not feel the loss as an abstract variance. They would feel it as higher contributions delayed retirement security and pressure on local budgets. She said the model did not only misprice risk, it misplaced the people who would carry it. The trustees understood that. Maybe not every technical detail, not yet, but they understood the shape of the danger. More importantly, they understood the difference between a person trying to impress them and a person trying to protect them. Graham tried one more time. He said Iris had been away from institutional finance for years. He said markets had evolved. He said her past work was respected, but not sufficient to challenge a contemporary structured product reviewed by Sterling and Hale's senior team. It sounded reasonable. That was how people like Graham survived. Their defenses sounded reasonable until someone checked the underlying facts. Iris reached into the pocket of her uniform and removed one folded sheet of paper. It was not a client document. It was a handwritten index of the 2011 memo she had found in the records room, with the box number title and page references. She gave it to Evelyn's counsel, not to Graham. Then she said Sterling and Hale's own founder had reviewed a similar structure in 2011 and warned against selling stability created by assumptions. She said the memo was in the firm's records room, unless someone had moved it overnight. She said the language in that memo described the same risk pattern now being minimized in the Harbor Yield Reserve. One of the partners along the wall went pale. Nadine Cho, the compliance officer, had been sitting near the back of the room since the beginning, quiet enough that many visitors had not noticed her. But Iris had seen her. Nadine had the stillness of someone who had arrived with questions already loaded. Now Nadine stood. She said compliance had received a letter regarding the Harbor Yield Reserve and had begun a preliminary review. She said the 2011 memo had been located that morning. She said model version history showed changes to the stress scenario references within the previous week. She said further review was required before any client recommendation could proceed. Graham stared at her as if betrayal had entered through the wrong door. But betrayal was not what had happened. Documentation had happened. Memory had happened. The things powerful people count on others not noticing had been noticed. Northbridge called for an immediate recess. Their consultant requested access to the model. Their counsel requested a copy of the 2011 memo. Sterling and Hale's senior partner, a careful man named Arthur Vale, looked as though 10 years had passed over his face in 10 minutes. The recess lasted 47 minutes. During that time, Iris sat alone in a small side room with her cleaning cart parked beside her. No one seemed to know whether she was a staff member, a whistleblower, an expert, or a problem. So they left her there, which was almost funny. After all that, they still did not know where to put her. Lena came in once and apologized. Iris told her not to waste apology on the wrong person. Lena's hands were shaking. She had just risked her job in a room full of people who could make sure she never worked in finance again. Iris knew that fear. She also knew that Lena had crossed the line many people spend their whole lives avoiding. So Iris told her the truth. She said courage often feels terrible while it is happening. Lena laughed once, very softly, because it was not inspirational in the way people expect. It was better than that. It was accurate. When the meeting reconvened, the mood had changed completely. Graham no longer stood at the head of the table. He sat beside counsel, jaw tight, hands clasped. The remote had been taken away from him. The Northbridge consultant had run a preliminary check and confirmed that Iris's concern was valid. The corrected stress case materially weakened the downside protection claim. Further diligence was necessary. Northbridge did not sign. They suspended consideration of the harbor yield reserve pending independent review. Sterling and Hale issued all the careful words firms use when trying not to bleed in public. Internal review, client-first commitment, governance process, cooperation, temporary leave. But inside the building, people knew what had happened. Graham Reddick had tried to close a massive deal while ignoring a serious risk concern. He had dismissed a junior analyst. He had retaliated against a cleaner. He had used a paper written by that same cleaner to create the appearance of credibility, and he had done all of it in front of the very clients whose trust he was trying to win. Poetic justice rarely arrives wearing thunder. Sometimes it arrives with version history. Within days, compliance found more emails showing that Graham had been told to clarify the Bridge 3 exposure. Comments removed from the deck. A model file renamed after Lena's test showed unfavorable results. A message from Martin Keene advising the team to keep the discussion verbal until after the Northbridge vote. None of it looked dramatic by itself. Together, it formed the quiet architecture of a cover-up. Martin resigned first. Graham held on longer. Men like Graham often mistake delay for innocence. He hired counsel. He spoke of misunderstandings and process gaps. He claimed Iris had misinterpreted materials and Nadine had overreacted under pressure. But the facts did not need to shout. They sat in folders, timestamps, drafts, and deleted comments, patient as stone. Sterling and Hale placed him on leave, then terminated him for cause. The matter was referred to regulators. Several clients requested reviews of products Graham had led. A promotion he had expected vanished. Invitations stopped coming. People who once laughed too quickly at his jokes discovered urgent reasons to be unavailable. It would have been easy to make the story about his downfall, but Iris never thought that was the most important part. Graham had made choices. He deserved consequences. But if one arrogant man fell and the room stayed the same, then the lesson would be too small. The deeper problem was not only that Graham had ignored a cleaner. It was that the building had trained itself not to hear certain kinds of people at all. Iris understood that because she had spent years moving through spaces designed to benefit from her labor, while disregarding her mind. That became clear 2 weeks later when Arthur Vale invited her upstairs. Not through the service entrance, through the main lobby. Security issued her a visitor badge, then seemed unsure whether to ask for identification. The receptionist recognized her and then overcorrected with a smile too large for the moment. People in suits watched from the corners of their eyes as Iris crossed the marble floor in her plain coat and black shoes. She did not walk slowly to make a point. She walked at the pace of someone who had cleaned that same lobby enough times to know which tiles were loose. Arthur met her in a conference room overlooking the river. Nadine Cho was there. So was a human resources executive Iris had never seen before. On the table sat a folder, a glass of water, and a plate of pastries, arranged with the nervous care institutions use when they know they have behaved badly. Arthur began with gratitude. Iris let him finish. He apologized for the way she had been treated. He acknowledged that Sterling and Hale had failed to respond properly to her warning. He said the firm wanted to engage her as a special consultant during the review. There would be compensation, of course, generous compensation. They were also prepared to speak with the cleaning contractor about ensuring her position remained secure. It was a polished offer. Better than nothing. Still, Iris looked at the folder and thought of Mrs. Alvarez rubbing her forehead in the supply room. She thought of cleaners losing hours because a managing director felt embarrassed. She thought of Lena almost deleting the truth to keep her job. She thought of her younger self carrying warnings into rooms that found her inconvenient. Then Iris asked how many cleaning staff were employed directly by Sterling and Hale. Arthur looked confused. None, he said. The firm used vendors. Iris asked how many vendor staff had access to reporting channels if they saw safety issues, harassment, misconduct, or client materials mishandled. The HR executive shifted slightly. Arthur said that was a fair question. Iris said fair questions were not enough. She did not raise her voice. She did not perform anger for them. She simply laid out the conditions under which she would consider helping the firm. Vendor staff needed a protected reporting channel. Cleaning and facilities workers needed confidentiality training that respected them as responsible adults, not as risks to be managed. Junior analysts needed the right to escalate model concerns without going through the person whose deal was being challenged. Compliance needed direct access to model version history for client-facing products, and Northbridge needed a full, honest explanation without Sterling and Hale hiding behind language no pension trustee could understand. Then she paused. There was one more condition. She wanted Sterling and Hale to fund a paid fellowship for people from non-traditional backgrounds who wanted to enter financial risk compliance or operations. Administrative assistants, veterans, caregivers returning to work, community college students, vendor employees, people who had lived near money all their lives without being invited to understand how it moved. Arthur listened. Maybe for the first time in years, someone in that building listened without waiting for his turn to speak. The firm agreed to most of it quickly, and the rest after lawyers turned the words into safer shapes. That is how institutions change, not in a clean burst, but through meetings, drafts, resistance, pressure, and people who refuse to let the first apology become the last action. Iris accepted a consulting role first. She refused to be used as a symbol before anything real changed. For 3 months, she worked with Nadine to review risk processes and rebuild escalation paths. She read models at a conference table, now under bright lights with her own laptop and a temporary badge that opened the executive floor. Some people treated her with awkward reverence. Others avoided her. A few resented her. She preferred honest resentment to fake warmth. At least resentment admitted something had shifted. Lena stayed at Sterling and Hale, not because Iris told her to, but because the firm needed people who had already proven they could tell the truth under pressure. She was transferred out of Graham's old group and into compliance analytics, where her habit of checking uncomfortable assumptions became an asset instead of a liability. Mrs. Alvarez's crew was not magically rescued overnight. That would make a cleaner story, but life is rarely clean in that way. Still, within 6 months, Sterling Hale changed its vendor contract. Wages rose. Sick leave improved. Retaliation protections were written into the agreement. Vendor staff received a direct hotline, paid training hours, and badges that identified them by full name instead of contractor category. The first time Mrs. Alvarez saw the new contract, she read the sick leave section twice. Then she called Iris and said only that it was about time. Iris smiled for the first time all day. Northbridge hired an independent firm to review not only the harbor yield reserve, but every complex product presented to them in the previous 5 years. They avoided the deal. The pension fund did not become rich because Iris spoke up. It simply avoided a trap. Sometimes the most important victory is not gaining something. Sometimes it is keeping people from losing what they earned. That part mattered to Iris. She did not want the world to turn her into a miracle. Miracles are too easy to admire and too hard to repeat. What happened at Sterling Hale was not a miracle. It was a woman paying attention. It was years of study no one had applauded. It was a junior analyst choosing not to look away. It was a compliance officer taking a handwritten note warning seriously before it was convenient. It was an old memo left in a damaged box. It was the memory of a father who taught his daughter that numbers belong to people. 3 months after the Northbridge meeting, Sterling Hale offered Iris a permanent position. The title went through several versions. Senior Risk Advisor sounded too temporary. Director sounded too political. Consultant sounded too easy to dismiss. In the end, Nadine proposed Director of Applied Risk Review, a role designed to challenge assumptions in client-facing products and translate complex risk into language clients could actually understand. Iris read the offer twice. The salary was more than she had made in years. There were benefits, retirement contributions, paid time off, a real office, though she requested a modest one near compliance instead of a glass corner space. She would need to renew certifications, complete training, and work with a team that included people who had ignored her months before. It was not a fairy tale. It was work that suited her. On her first official day, she arrived early, not through the service entrance, through the front doors, while the lobby was still quiet and the morning security guard was finishing his coffee. She wore a dark green blazer Maya had helped her choose, simple earrings, and the same black shoes she had worn for cleaning because they were comfortable and already knew the building. At reception, the new badge was waiting. Iris Mitchell, Director Applied Risk Review. For a long moment, she held it in her hand. A badge is a small piece of plastic. It should not carry so much history. But this one did. It carried every night she had emptied trash beside people who did not know she could read what they wasted. It carried every job application unanswered, every time someone saw her uniform and lowered their expectations, every bill paid late, every page studied after midnight, every warning ignored until it came from a voice with the right title. Maya had asked if she wanted to throw away the old cleaning badge. Iris said no. She kept it in her desk drawer, not as a wound, but as evidence. There are people who want success to mean escaping who you were. Iris did not. The woman with the mop bucket had saved the pension fund. The woman with the director title was not replacing her. She was bringing her into the room where she should have been heard all along. The first major meeting Iris led was not with executives. It was with the cleaning staff. Sterling Hale scheduled it in a training room on the 17th floor. There were sandwiches, coffee, translated handouts, and paid time for everyone who attended. Some people came suspicious. Some came amused. Some came because Mrs. Alvarez told them it was worth their time. Iris stood at the front, not behind a podium, and explained what client confidentiality meant, not as a threat, as trust. She explained what to do if they found sensitive documents left unsecured. She explained how to report misconduct without going through a manager who might be part of the problem. She explained that seeing something wrong did not require a graduate degree. It required attention and a safe path to speak. A man named Tomas raised his hand and asked whether anyone would actually listen. It was the right question. Iris did not pretend the answer was simple. She said, systems only work when people keep using them and keep testing them. She said the firm had failed before. She said that was why the process now had names, deadlines, and people accountable for responses. Then she gave them Nadine's direct office number, printed large enough to read without squinting. Mrs. Alvarez sat in the back with her arms crossed, pretending not to be moved. Afterward, she hugged Iris quickly and told her not to get too important to answer her phone. Iris said she would try. The fellowship began the following year. The first class included a former medical billing clerk, a night security guard who had been studying data analytics online, a single father from a community college accounting program, a receptionist who knew more about client behavior than half the business development team, and a building maintenance technician who could spot operational risk faster than most managers because he understood how systems actually fail. Iris taught the first session herself. She wrote one sentence on the board. Risk is what happens when reality refuses to obey the presentation. The fellows laughed, but they wrote it down. Then she taught them how to read a chart that looked reassuring. She showed them how to ask what assumptions had to be true for a promise to hold. She showed them that jargon often creates distance between a decision and the people affected by it. She taught them to ask who benefits if a risk remains hard to understand. And every time someone apologized for asking a basic question, Iris stopped them. She said, basic questions are where most hidden problems begin to sweat. Over time, the story spread beyond Sterling and Hale. And first, reporters loved the simplest version. A cleaner stopped a multi-million-dollar deal. A janitor exposed Wall Street arrogance. A woman with a mop knew more than executives. The headlines were catchy, and Iris disliked most of them. Not because she was ashamed of cleaning. She was not. She just liked them because they treated the cleaning work as proof that her knowledge was surprising, when the real surprise should have been that anyone assumed knowledge could not live there. Cleaners read. Bus drivers invest. Receptionists notice patterns. Caregivers manage medical systems more complicated than some corporate workflows. Mothers calculate survival with a precision no spreadsheet can fully capture. People are not empty because their job title is small. When a local news anchor asked Iris how it felt to go from cleaner to finance director, she corrected the premise gently. She said she had not gone from nobody to somebody. She had been somebody the whole time. That line traveled farther than she expected. It appeared in articles, graduation speeches, social media posts, and community newsletters. Maya printed it and taped it to the inside of her nursing school locker. Mrs. Alvarez said it sounded like something Iris would say and then complain about people repeating too much. Graham Reddick heard it too, though not from inside Sterling and Hale. His case moved slowly, as such cases often do. He was not dragged away in handcuffs from a boardroom. Real consequences for powerful people usually arrive through letters, hearings, settlements, barred registrations, damaged credibility, and doors that no longer open when they used to. He lost his position, his standing, and the certainty that had made him careless with other people's futures. Iris did not follow every update. She had no appetite for making his punishment the center of her life. Still, one detail reached her and stayed there. During a regulatory interview, Graham reportedly insisted that he had never believed Iris could understand the product at that level. He said it as a defense, as if underestimating her, explained the choices he made. To Iris, that was the confession beneath all the other words. He had not only misread a person, he had built decisions on the comfort of that misreading. Sterling and Hale did change, though never perfectly. No institution becomes moral because one embarrassing scandal forces a memo. There were still politics, egos, deadlines, and people who preferred easy profit to difficult truth. Iris knew that. She had no illusions left that a new title could disinfect a whole building. But there were differences. Conference rooms got cleaner in more ways than one. Draft models included plain language risk summaries. Junior analysts had escalation paths outside the reporting lines. Compliance reviewed assumptions before client decks were polished beyond recognition. Vendor staff were invited into safety and reporting processes as people who occupied the building, not as shadows passing through it. And on the 32nd floor, people began reading the plaque in the lobby again. Finance is supposed to protect the future, not gamble with it. Elijah Hale's sentence had been there the whole time. It had simply become decoration to people who repeated values more easily than they practiced them. One evening, almost a year after the Northbridge meeting, Iris stayed late reviewing a hospital endowment proposal. The office had emptied into its nighttime quiet. Through the window, the city glowed in layers, cars moving below like slow red threads. The cleaning crew arrived around 7:30. Carts rolling softly over the carpet. A young cleaner named Denise entered Iris's office and apologized for interrupting. Iris looked up from the report and moved her tea mug so Denise could wipe the desk. Denise smiled, then noticed the open pages. She hesitated. Iris recognized that hesitation. It was the moment a person decides whether curiosity is allowed. Denise said her brother had been trying to understand retirement plans at his new job, and the words made no sense. She asked, almost embarrassed, whether expense ratios mattered. Iris closed the report. She said yes, they mattered. Then she explained it. Not with condescension, not with jargon. She explained how a small fee, repeated year after year, could quietly eat a large piece of someone's future. She wrote numbers on a sticky note. Denise leaned closer. The vacuum hummed somewhere down the hall. The city kept moving outside. It was not a grand moment. No executives watched. No cameras recorded it. No one applauded. But Iris felt something settle in her chest. This was the work, too. Not just stopping bad deals. Not just exposing arrogant men. Not just earning the title that should have come sooner. The work was making knowledge less guarded, less polished, less trapped behind doors that opened only for certain badges. Before Denise left, Iris gave her the sticky note and told her to bring her brother's plan documents if he wanted help understanding them. Denise folded the note carefully, the way people fold things that may matter later. After she left, Iris opened her desk drawer. Inside were 2 badges, one old, one new. The old badge was scratched near the edge. The photo, slightly faded, the word contractor printed beneath her name. The new badge was clean and official, with a title that made people return her emails quickly. Iris placed them side by side for a moment. They looked different. They opened different doors. But neither one contained her mind. That had always belonged to her. Iris thought of her father at the kitchen table, tapping a pencil against a column of numbers. She thought of her mother coming home with swollen hands from offices where no one knew her name. She thought of Aaron, asleep beneath a thin blanket, while she wrote the article that would one day return to her on a boardroom screen. She thought of Maya in scrubs, learning how to read monitors and faces and the quiet signs people miss when they are too busy to care. Then she looked out at the empty office. For years, Iris had cleaned rooms after decisions were made. Now she entered before the decisions hardened. That was the difference. Not revenge, not rescue, access. And with access came responsibility. The story of Iris Mitchell is not powerful because a cleaner turned out to be intelligent. That should never have been shocking. It is powerful because a room full of educated people had to face the poverty of their own assumptions. They had to see that status can make people careless, that polish can hide ignorance, and that the person nearest the trash bin may understand exactly what everyone else is throwing away. Real knowledge is not fragile. It can survive layoffs, uniforms, night shifts, unpaid bills, and years of being underestimated. It can wait in notebooks. It can grow in silence. It can sharpen itself on disappointment. It can walk into a room that never invited it and still tell the truth, clearly enough to save people who may never know its name. Iris did not become worthy when Sterling and Hale gave her an office. She became visible. There is a difference, and maybe that is the part worth remembering the next time you enter a building where some people are greeted by name and others are expected to disappear. The next time someone with a quiet job notices something everyone else missed. The next time a person is treated as if their uniform, accent, age, skin, salary, or title tells the whole story. Look again. The mind that saves the room may not be sitting at the head of the table. It may be standing by the door holding a set of keys, waiting for someone to ask what she sees. And if no one asks, she may speak anyway, because truth does not become less true when it comes from the person who cleans the floor.